Hi everyone, hello, and thank you for taking the time to join us today on our discussion of what is meant by true well-being in the home, an increasingly topical area when it comes to interior design. I thought it would be, well, obviously great to start with each of the panel of decorators and leading designer to introduce themselves, and if you could just explain a little bit about your business and what you do, and if at the same time you could give a short summary of what well-being means to you all, because I'm aware it's a term that has a rather broad definition, and so I think it could be great to hear at the beginning of kind of how well-being resonates with each of you. That sounds all right. Irene, perhaps we could get going with you, please.
Sure. I'm Irene Gunter. I run Gunter & Co. Interiors from Chelsea. We're an interior design studio of 7, and we take on about 8 projects each year, mainly in the residential side of things for private individuals. We love working with natural materials and colour, and yeah, that's us. So what does well-being mean to me? I think well-being and home very much go hand in hand. Home is kind of where you retreat yourself, where you are meant to feel most safe and secure. And actually, when you look up well-being in the thesaurus, it has the same meaning as comfort. So armed with this, I usually focus on how a space makes someone feel, focusing on the senses. So from the stylistic elements that your eyes pick up when you enter a space, to the textures and upholstery that you touch, as well as the elements in an interior that make up the acoustics. How does a space sound? And at the same time, well-being is something that can be determined from a much more scientific angle, something that can be measured, certified and monitored, to make sure that the built environment impacts your health in the most positive way.
Brilliant. That sounds fascinating. Lots to talk about there. Alexandra, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your business?
I'm Alexandra Nord, one of the founders and creative directors at Milia. Milia is a London, Stockholm-based interior and architecture practice, and we're working on some of London's most prime residential developments, such as the Bryanston and Regent's Crescent. We also focus a lot on listed country estates, as well as grand townhouses in London. And what does well-being mean to me? So well-being, is very much about having a healthy mind and body. And as Irene said, very much the environments that we occupy affect our well-being, and definitely environments that have a strong connection to the natural world help to contribute towards a healthy well-being, whether it's a view of nature or good natural light or sort of complementary interior scheme that's been inspired by nature. All these elements help towards a healthy well-being.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thanks, Alexandra. And finally, over to you, Philip. Can you tell us a little bit about your business and what well-being means to you?
Yep, thank you. So I'm Philip Dowds. I'm a director of Octo Technologies, and OKTOair is the health and wellness division of Octo Technologies. And we're merging the health sciences with the building sciences and using technology to do so. And effectively, we're focusing on how the space around you affects you. That's our main focus.
Fantastic. And just a little bit about well-being, how it sort of resonates with you, how you interpret that concept.
Yes, well, it's improving people's health through technology, and there are many ways to do that, and I think we'll talk in more detail about that.
Fantastic. Good idea. We'll get on. We'll get onto that in a sec. So first, kind of going back a bit to the sort of the moving slightly, putting aside but not forever the tech, and going back to the interiors. I thought it'd be interesting to discuss with you about what makes a space feel like a home. When I was doing a bit of research for doing this, I was reading Alan de Botton's, well, I didn't read the whole book, but I did a little summary of his book on the architecture of happiness. And he said that what we tend to do is we look for beauty in a place, but actually it's aspects that lie underneath our conscious that make buildings feel attractive or unattractive. And we've all felt that, I'm sure everyone on this panel and everyone listening, when you walk into a house and it just feels right, it feels comfortable, it has a good karma about it. So as interior designers, I'd love to know what your secrets are to achieving this. When when you're also welcoming a client back into their home, having, what is it that makes up that sort of slightly nebulous, hard to sort of pin down sort of home feeling? Irene, perhaps if we could start with your ideas on that, would be great, please.
So to us, boosting a client's sense of well-being in their home is very much tied to wearing the hat of a detective and learning to celebrate what makes that person unique. So at the beginning of each project, we spend a lot of time getting to know each client, from the first thing they do when they come home, which is very different to many different people, to the last thing that they do before they go to bed. We try to find out what they find invigorating, what they find relaxing, kind of figuring out what makes them tick. Do they really long for like a clutter-free environment to unwind after a hectic day? Or do they really enjoy cheerful colors and seeing lots of personal artifacts to boost their mood? So armed with that kind of information, we then get to work on guiding the design into a direction that isn't just about how things look, but how they make you feel as well. And in a world that's so focused on images, we find that we often have to redirect our clients back to the core concept that we agreed in the beginning, because it's so easy to get distracted by an amazing picture of a house in Miami or a penthouse in New York, and the visual is what it's all about, rather than really thinking, okay, is this how I want my home to feel and what I want to experience when I walk into the house. But starting point for each project is very much to create a link with the original architecture. And what I mean with that is, often you find in hospitality or kind of more retail design, you see one thing on the outside of a building, and then you go inside and it's a complete departure from that exterior architecture, and it's a big shock, and that's the wow factor. What we like to do in the more residential settings is to make sure that the internal architecture has a really strong connection to the external architecture. So enhancing and reintroducing period features that can boost someone's connection to the house and really improve to how it makes them feel. And also making sure that when a house is quite modern on the outside, that you carry on that language on the inside. It sounds really simple, but it somehow really boosts your sense of belonging and connection. Then at the same time, we also try to make sure that the rooms have a clear and focused identity. So usually that gets tied into storage, making sure that there's a place for everything and everything has its place. It's a really kind of common saying in the design world. And that just means that your home is clutter-free and you enter a space and you're able to focus on the key pieces that have meaning to your client rather than the clutter, and that kind of principle that will always help to give someone that stillness and that calm feeling that they need to feel at ease and at home. Then if we wanted to kind of take it up a notch, then we can look at how well-being can be approached from a much more scientific angle, and it's something that can be measured and monitored and improved over time. And it's tied into a concept that is called the well-building standard, which was developed in the States. And in the States, it's quite common, and it's starting to make its way over here in the UK. But at the moment, it's mainly used in bigger commercial settings like shopping centres, offices and schools. But we're looking at how these key principles that they look to measure and monitor and certify, how they can also be used in a much more residential, small scale setting. So they look at 7 different principles, air is one of them. You know, what is the quality of the air? I think Philip will be touching on that in a lot more detail later on. Then the second one is water. So we always add water filters right from the beginning of the build phase of a project to make sure that the house can benefit from clean water and people feel confident. Nourishment is a big one when it comes to offices and schools. When it comes to a residential setting, it's about making sure that a cooking environment is big enough and there's enough focus on cooking things from scratch, steaming rather than frying, storing fresh produce, having a pantry available. Those are all the things that we make sure that we try and take off and encourage in our clients' homes. Then when it comes to lighting design, the principle of circadian lighting is quite a big focus in the concept of well-being within the home. And again, that's something I think Philip will touch on later. And then we've got comfort. And comfort obviously means a lot of things to a lot of people. But when it comes to measuring this from a more scientific angle, what people are interested in is making sure that when you're trying to wind down and go to sleep, you've got all the items available to you. So we're always looking at it as in, is a house soundproof? Are bedrooms soundproof when there is a loo on the other side of the wall? If someone goes to the bathroom at night, you don't want to be woken up by them flushing the loo. Is our blackout blinds integrated, and are we thinking of those early enough to make sure that it's not an afterthought and that that's compromised later on in the build? And then the last two elements, fitness, we see a big push now in people trying to create a small or a big space in their house for home fitness setups, and especially in the new build homes that we're working on, whole areas are being devoted to that, and I think that's a really good change. And then finally, the mind, that's kind of pillar number 7, to try and make sure that your home is as focused on well-being as it can be. And that's very much tied to the original element that I mentioned about feeling that connection with the architecture, as well as the as well as making sure that your home has been laid out for you for how you want it to feel, rather than it just being a generic pretty picture that you've kind of ripped out of a magazine.
Amazing, thank you, Irene. That's that all sounds so interesting. Alexandra, perhaps you could add to that. You know, how you, I'm sure you use some of the same techniques, of course, but is there anything else that you would employ?
I think, yeah, just building on what Irene has mentioned with the sort of 5 pillars, and you know, I think thinking about the earliest design phase of a project, you know, our approach is always to try and emphasize views to nature, to try and think about layout and details, so you're maximizing access to sunlight and sky. You know, all these elements are really important for well-being at the home, and sort of a very good foundation to a sort of well-designed home. Also, you know, just layering on top of that, you know, natural materials, trying to introduce materials with organic patterning and texture. This all adds to a very calm environment. Good air, obviously this is something which Philip is going to talk about, but you know, quite often the concept of a newly renovated home is a nice one, but actually the reality with the building smells, it takes a while for it to actually feel like a home. So when we're dressing freshly renovated homes, you know, we're thinking about introducing fresh cut flowers and being quite specific about what natural aromas we're putting where. So maybe more citrus smells being more uplifting in study areas, whereas jasmine and lavender being more calming for more relaxation areas. So these are all things, you know, that we pick up when we, you know, senses that we pick up when we're going into a space that kind of really affects your well-being. And
And actually, Alexandra, on that note of aromas, is it the case that people are respond always in the same way to different aromas? Like you mentioned citrus and lavender, but I mean, is there sort of scientific sort of studies that say that actually we're all the same, that we have the same responses, or do you have to sit with your clients and go through kind of what makes them?
No, absolutely. There's definitely, you know, a science behind it. You know, we always, specifically with the home, try and opt for and guide our clients towards natural aromas. Because as we said from the outset, things that remind us of nature generally make us feel good. But yes, certainly this is something which, you know, we will always tailor make every kind of natural aroma and scent along with our sort of clients' preferences. Okay. But just things like fresh cut flowers, you know, especially when we're maybe dressing apartments to sell, you know, it just adds a very kind of fresh feel and yeah, it makes it good.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both for that. And now, and sort of, because of, you know, well-being obviously has this very much a sort of aesthetic and this kind of real sort of responsive side to it, but we can help support this with increasingly available amazing technology. And Philip, could you perhaps sort of take us through how well-being can improve, technology can improve well-being at home? What what your solutions are for this?
Yeah. First of all, I might give some fairly scary statistics there just to place everything in. So first of all, the World Health Organization has defined air pollution as the #1 environmental health risk, and the combined figure for indoor and outdoor premature deaths per year is 7 million people that are dying because of this. It causes stroke and lung cancer and heart disease and all manner of terrible things like this. And effectively what's happening is it's called particulate matter, which are very, very fine particles. Mm-hmm. They can, along with gases and other pollutants, make their way deep into our lungs and then further on into our bloodstream and cause all this terrible effects. And unfortunately, because it's invisible, really we as a human race have kind of ignored it. This one here I think really hits home. So I mentioned that there's 7 million die per year through pollution, and 6 million die from smoking cigarettes. So that kind of gives us, you know, a bit of a kick there to you know how bad this actually is. But on the positive side, there is actually something that we can do together about it. So what our system through intelligent sensors is measuring the pollutants and the particle matter and so on a room by room basis with very accurate detail, and that's feeding back along with at street level external air quality information, which is giving us, you know, air quality, but also things like pollen counts and so on. That then feeds into an artificial intelligence engine, which one of the things that it can do is with advanced air purification systems, which have been developed under grant from the US military to actually combat biological warfare. That's what's behind this technology. Wow. So that then can effectively disinfect and clean the air in the house and on a room by room basis. So that obviously, you know, has all manner of improvements, you know, reducing stress, reducing anxiety, improving sleep, you know, increasing motivation, just the whole general wellness improvement. So yeah, the information is bad, but there is something positive that can be done about it. Yeah.
There is now, and presumably this
there is now. There is
new tech. I mean, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have existed. I mean, how new is this technology?
This is brand new. This year. Yeah.
And Philip, you know, we're all aware. I mean, I know obviously you'll work with lots of new build developments, and so will Alexandra and Irene. But you know, the UK has the oldest housing stock in Europe and possibly the world. So a lot of us are, you know, in an environment like I am right now, I'm in an Edwardian house in London. Are there any ways of retrofitting this kind of technology into these older homes?
Well, yeah, so the answer is yes. So some of the schemes that we're working on right now are refurbishments where people are doing different levels of refurbishment. So whenever it's a full, if you like, refurbishment where they're maybe putting in whole building air conditioning systems or heat and ventilation systems, then it's quite easy to attach these filters onto those. But if that is, they're called our engineered solutions, which are supposed to be totally discreet and you don't see them, they're built into the fabric of the building. There has to be a certain amount of refurbishment being done to allow that to happen. You know, they can go into custom-made furniture and things like this as well. But there are also in-room solutions, portable solutions. So you could put these devices, they're quite small, you know, in particular rooms as well. But the ideal is to build them in.
Of course. I mean, when you say they're quite small, these devices, just out of interest, how small is small?
So it depends on the size of the space. So it has to circulate the air. So, you know, if it's like say for example in a reasonably sized living room, you would have, you know, a unit that's maybe, you know, 450 high by 250 wide, this kind of thing. And then if it's a, you know, you can have multiple units or bigger units then as well.
Sure. Fascinating. And Alexandra, have you got any examples of using this kind of technology in any of your projects? And, you know,
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I would start off by saying that seamless integration of all these kind of modern technologies like complex air filtration systems is really key to the delivery of good design, and really needs to be sort of seamlessly designed into the interior architecture. So at the Bryanston, the luxury apartments there have a very complex air filtration system, and we were lucky enough to be involved with that scheme from the very early design stages. So all the ductwork has been designed in, and it's concealed. And, you know, it's very important to think about the language of the vent, you know, the size of the vent, how wide it is, how deep it is. At the Bryanston, we've specified a very thin 50mm black slot vent. And, you know, the language of that fits in with the modern interiors that we're delivering, and this slot is concealed above joinery, above wall paneling, so it kind of fits in with the language, and you know it's kind of hidden away really. I think the challenge lies, as you said, with trying to retrofit these systems into interiors. And if you were dealing with a listed property, for example, where you're unable to touch the fabric of the interior, you know, as Philip mentioned, trying to think about freestanding joinery pieces, you know, against walls would be key, and then having the ventilation system at the top and the bottom. But you know, these could be integrated into a run of joinery. We quite often do it where we have maybe wardrobe spaces, or where we have displayed bookshelves in reception areas. So these kind of modern technologies, you know, the earlier you can get them in when designing a scheme and, you know, get your client on board, because obviously they are a really great thing, the better, and the easier it is for us as designers to kind of integrate them within the design.
Brilliant, fantastic. And I guess following on from that, it'd be just interesting to explore the importance of good lighting in you know, to create this kind of well, not perfect, but you know, good well-being in the home. Philip, you've obviously, this is something that you cover as well with your system technologies. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So yeah, lighting plays a major part in the whole wellness experience also. And then maybe a good way to explain that would be to talk about, I'm sure we've all experienced the feeling of having been inside all day and then walking outside, and the feeling of relief, you know, that we just feel better when we go outside. And that's because, you know, a lot of the it's getting better these days, but the older type artificial lights had a very reduced spectrum, or has a very reduced spectrum, when we lose a lot of the benefits. And there is also another effect called the circadian rhythm effect, and how the light intensity and color temperature and so on is changing outside affects our internal rhythms. And that happens totally naturally if we're outside all day long. But if we do spend 90% of our lives inside, so that's not happening. And there are ways for technology to help that happen, to automatically vary the color temperature to match what's going on outside, and also the intensity. You know, so effectively what's happening, it's a cooler color temperature in the morning, and it's gradually getting warmer towards the end of the day. And that's what's happening outside with the natural sunlight, and we can replicate that through technology and indoors also.
And this can have an effect, can it not, on our quality of our sleep as well as our productivity during the day? That's
that whole range, yeah. So if productivity increases, and if you do it in your house, then your sleep improves. You know, it reduces stress, it reduces anxiety, and you know, it improves motivation. You know, there's a long list of all these benefits.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. And Alexandra, do you have any, I mean, you know, if you're again having this problem with retrofitting, or a client who's not necessarily sort of on board with the tech, are there any alternative ways to try and mirror the benefits of this this circadian lighting, or the idea to get the lighting right in the home without the tech?
Without the tech, you know, I'd say low-level ambient lighting is key, definitely, for more relaxation spaces. Can supplement that with candles. And as Philip says, this is all to signal to the brain to kind of relax. But, you know, where possible, and definitely in the prime residential schemes that we're working on, you know, we'll always push to have these sort of home automation systems that have the intelligent lighting systems. Because if you're able to do task appropriate lighting in the relevant spaces, this is all ways to control the, you know, one's mood in specific rooms. So this is definitely something that we always push when dealing with that. Dealing with our clients.
And Irene, is that the same with you? I mean, when you're dealing with clients who are perhaps not on sort of new build, you know, big new build residential schemes, but more sort of, you know, someone's doing up their own home, are you sort of seeing their increasing appetite for these kind of this sort of particular lighting technology in their home?
I think that the lighting technology is a nice to have. The dimmability, the circadian lighting, the lutron levels of control. I think what people are a little bit more actively looking for is the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery side of things, with the air filtration, just because of those very kind of intimidating statistics that Philip was saying earlier. I think people are just completely unaware you know, the irony of the air inside your home being more toxic than the air outside, especially in a city like London, where you would expect it to be the opposite. So I think we're seeing people saying, okay, we've got a certain budget set aside for refurbishing our 5-story family home in Kensington. Do we really need, you know, this level of, let's say, kitchen appliances, or can we shave off a little bit and, you know, make some savings to allocate a pocket of money to our family's health? Because at the end of the day, you know, nothing is more valuable than that. I think it's just a lack of education that now we're all catching up on quite rapidly. And we see that when our clients have, you know, been exposed to those facts and the education, and you know, that yes, the substantial work that you need to put that in, but the substantial benefit it can deliver as well, it's something that everyone is very much open to.
Fascinating. And again, this, I mean, these conversations just wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, but that you're saying they are now part of daily.
To be honest, I think it's also a question of you know, there was the whole topic of sustainability, and I think now that everyone seems to be truly well and covered on that topic, that they're moving on to well-being. But I think it's also a question of which field you look at. I think if you speak to 10 architects, they would have known about this 5 years ago. It's just filtering into the world of, you know, high-end interiors a little bit more slowly, but you know, I'm glad it's there now.
And I also think you know, with current events, people are just spending so much more time at home and needing to fulfill, you know, a number of different activities, you know, whether it be spending time with the family or at work, you know, and where we would quite often leave the house to commute to work, you know, leaving the house and, you know, having the experience of natural light or better air are all things which prepare us for our day. You know, in the absence of, you know, leaving the home to get to your desk, these are all things that we need to, you know, integrate into the people's building services. Yeah,
no, fantastic. Well, listen, we're nearly at the end. I just thought it'd be nice to finish on a high with any sort of examples of success stories or maybe sort of well-being elements that you've integrated into some of your projects that you're particularly proud of, and perhaps I'd like to do more of. If anyone has any examples, I don't know, but Irene, whether something sort of springs to mind of a project that you've done that you just think, yeah, that was a really good example of sort of getting true well-being at home.
Yeah, I think we completed a project last year in Kensington for a lovely family, and what we achieved there was kind of well-being from two angles. So on the one hand, they had a beautiful home, but several of the biggest spaces were underutilized. They just didn't have an identity. They felt very stark and cold. They sounded quite horrible. So we approached it and we, you know, spent lots of time with them to understand how they live, what is the best way that we can make this house work harder for them. So we re-identified the rooms and we recreated, you know, lovely interiors which felt warm and cozy and had the right kind of lighting and color scheme for the purpose that they needed to have. And all of a sudden, you know, the feedback was, gosh, it's crazy how all of a sudden we use every single room of the house and it feels like a whole new space that we're inhabiting. And that's much more from an kind of practical, emotional point of view. But then we also kitted it out with the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery and the filtration system. And it is a really big difference, even when I step into that house versus stepping into any other house. You know, the air quality is just far superior. And, you know, if you feel alert for longer, you know, you don't feel drowsy after a while, you don't feel like the need to escape your house.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to see that applied in practice and that it can have such a positive effect.
Fantastic. Alexandra, any sort of?
Yes, quite recently we were asked to dress to sell a Georgian townhouse in St John's Wood. So the developer asked us to come up with some options for what was a lower ground space, and he wanted an alternative to sort of energy guzzling gym space. So we put forward an idea of having a relaxation room. So although the room was lower ground, it had a very large frameless skylight with views of the sky. The property did have an intelligent air filtration system and options for mood settings for lighting and temperature. So we will be able to control the space depending on what activity was going to happen in the space. And we included a Japanese daybed and yoga equipment and tried to introduce and use natural materials where possible. And actually we developed quite a striking sculptural piece that included some Scandinavian moss to have that connection to the natural world. And you know, it was a fun project for us, because I think you know, when you're designing these wellness spaces, a lot of it is about emotion and feeling, and so we kind of really enjoyed that. And you know, the response has been great from those that have seen it. You know, everyone sort of relaxes when they come into the space. You know, we have a lot of busy agents sort of whizzing around from property to property, but everyone sort of pauses when they're in that space. So yeah, I think that's been quite a success.
That sounds very, very cool. And Philip, I assume that you'll tell me that, you know, that your sort of highlights of positive stories is the fact that everyone's actually cottoning on to the importance and the relevance and the transforming effects that this technology can have in the home. Yeah,
I think as well, you know, the whole technology for wellness movement was going at a certain speed, but it has absolutely been accelerated due to, you know, this whole COVID thing. So as terrible as COVID obviously is, I mean, that might be one positive thing that comes out of it, is the change in people's perception about how important indoor air quality actually is. So from our point of view, like we are close to our capacity limit, so we are actively trying to increase our engineering and design department as fast as we possibly can, just because we haven't really mentioned this, but in the cleaning of the indoor air quality, this system actually can remove the COVID virus, and has been proven to do so. You know, and so the size of the particles of COVID are between 0.08 microns and 0.14, and this system can go down to 0.07.
Wow. Amazing. Well, I'm quite proud that we managed to talk for about half an hour and only mentioned the word COVID now.
Yeah, just once.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. I think that was a really, really, really good chat, and really fascinating from my point of view, and hopefully for everyone who's watching this. So just, yeah, big thank you. Thank you for your time and sharing all your thoughts.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.